Um, my route took me north from Porto, which half must have been 150 kilometers walking through Portugal, straight north, and then another 150 kilometers through Galicia in northern Spain to finally reaching Santiago. And most nights I stopped in these old sort of market towns, and they all had something interesting about them historically. Many of the routes were Roman ways, and the guidebook tells you when you're walking how much of each day is going to be on a motorway, which is usually only very slight because they try to avoid motorways, how much on tarmac, how much on paths, and how much through the forest. So you can see in advance. It also lets you can see how much you're going to go up and down. So you can plan your day, and the days, each day would last between 18 kilometers and 35. And it wasn't really difficult, except the last 5 kilometers every day was killing, because you somehow knew you were near the end of the day, but you hadn't quite reached it, and your body started to relax, but still you had to keep going. I found the last 5 kilometers, whether we're going 15, 18, or 35, always the worst. Difficult. There were other pilgrims who I got to know and meet from time to time, and I was curious about the fact there were no English, and no one had heard of any Englishmen, except they talked about this Englishman who hadn't brought water but had brought whiskey, and they all knew about him, and they'd all been talking about him and what kind of crazy Englishman this was, and I didn't really like to admit that it was me, and because there's kind of Chinese whispers that goes, everyone talks about everyone else, and being the only Englishman on the route, I'd become quite talked about. There was a lot of Spaniards, quite a few Italians, some North Americans, Australians, New Zealand, and a huge number of German women of a certain age. And I would usually have a harem of middle-aged or elderly German women with me by the end of the day. And I tried to find out why it was. And it turned out they'd all read a book called I'm Off, written by a lovable German comedian. He sounds like kind of comic Stephen Fry, someone much loved. And he's written this book about the Camino, and it sold 3 million copies in Germany. And so all these German women had been inspired by him to do the walk. People are very companionable on the walks, and you can nobody sort of imposes on you, but you do share exchanges of discussions about the weather and other pleasantries, and you feel reassured that if you have any problem, there's someone there will lend you a hand. One of the German women had a bad ankle, and I gave her a stick, the only stick I'd bought a wonderful staff from a roadside farmer's woman who was selling bamboo staffs, and I knew if I'd had any problems I would have been supported, so that was very reassuring.